Pine Tree asked myself, Assemblyman Robert Smullen, and Sheriff Jeffrey Smith if we would be on a panel to answer questions and try to explain the new gun laws. I can tell you there's probably more unanswered questions than questions we'll be able to answer. A lot of things are still up in the air. Significantly, there's 2 lawsuits that have already been filed, one by the Gun Owners of America and one by Carl Palladino, a congressional candidate who ran for governor years ago. Those lawsuits have not been before a judge yet. They've commenced. We do believe that the one federal lawsuit for a stay will be heard in August, so that there's a decision before September 1st. I think people have to hit a little pause because some of the rules are designed by their very nature, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to circumvent the Supreme Court decision on the Second Amendment. So you can't legislate around the Constitution in this regard. And what I think it is, it's so confusing. And some of the dates, for example, we have to instruct people, starting with applications after September 1st, and the new course, 16-hour course, but they haven't certified any new instructors, and they're not going to have the guidelines for that for several months. So how can you start instructing and meeting the statute if they don't certify people until several months? So that's an inherent delay built in. So I think that people are going to want to know, do I have to recertify? And you got to remember, we have in New York the re-registration every 5 years with the state police. Now what they're talking about doing is making it every 3 years that you have to recertify at the course to continue to carry concealed. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I want to be very careful myself now, and also tonight we want to be careful because a lot of this is unsettled until we get through it. The social media component, where they want to look at your Facebook or other social media, some of that's going to be questionable. The business with, who you live with, things of that nature. Obviously, we don't want people who are living with felons to have, felons to have access to firearms. There's been a lot of controversy over the Adirondack Park, which is a forest preserve. The rules say, you can't carry unless you're hunting and you got your license and all that. But also, the question is, well, what if I want to go hiking? I don't want to get attacked by an animal in the woods, or not. If you get a rabid fox, a rabid raccoon, you have a right to protect yourself even from animals. So there's some questions there that the way it was rushed and designed is to circumvent your rights as a law-abiding citizen. I think, Brian, I'm going to say this tonight, and I think it's important to note, there's over 350 million firearms in this country, handguns, rifles, shotguns, and there's about 350 million people that we know that are legally here. Every year, approximately 45,000 people get killed by firearms and 120,000 get injured. Of those 165,000, almost 50% are by suicide. Let me say that again. Of the 165,000 people that are either injured or killed by firearms, rifles, shotguns, handguns, a year in this country, almost 50% of them are by suicide. So accessibility to firearms to people with mental health is a big issue. However, when we start looking, any unnecessary death from a firearm, and I'm not talking, when I say unnecessary, the shooter at the mall last week where the lawful gun owner in 15 seconds dispatched the active shooter. He ultimately saved probably dozens of lives. They don't publicize that. It was a one-day story. So, whether you get killed in a street crime, whether you get killed in a robbery, whether you get killed in a drive-by or an active shooter, those are people who didn't have to die. But the answer is, multifaceted, and they didn't consult with law enforcement, the judiciary, probation, parole. They didn't consult with mental health professionals. They just decided this is what we're going to do. Same thing they did with the bail reform. So that's one of the biggest problems, is they don't sit down and talk to the people who have to enforce it and the people who see it firsthand. Last year in Chicago, over 70 12-year-olds, black and brown children, were killed by drive-bys and gang shooting. And you know, that's a lot of young kids, and people hear very little about that. So you can see that there's a lot of different variations when guns are used. In New York State, we almost have two states. In New York City, the violence is with handguns generally. Upstate, people are hunters, people are fishermen, people are outdoorsmen, and in fact, the smallest number of people who commit crimes with a lawful possessed gun are handgun owners. If they have a pistol permit, they're the least likely to commit a crime with that. So they're designing rules to the law-abiding citizens. Do you think a criminal or an active shooter is going to be discouraged, or are they going to find some way to get a gun and use it? They don't care about the law. I mean, as a judge, I had 200 trials, and unfortunately a lot of them were gun violence or gun possession. And the people who were career criminals, they're career criminals. They don't care about the law, they don't care about limits, they don't care about taking a safety course, you know. So they make all the rules towards the law-abiding citizens.
Okay, sir, a couple quick questions. You're very active here in and around Fulton County, obviously. So many people know you. What kinds of feedback have you heard from folks that you talk to in and around the area on these changes that are coming September 1st? I'm sure you've heard a lot of bad. Have you heard any good? What have you heard?
The only positives from a few people where anyone knows somebody who shouldn't have a gun. So I do get some about the red flag. They say that that's important to be able to red flag those people who may be dangerous. So that's a positive spot, perhaps, because there's some people who shouldn't have pistols or firearms, you know, and that is one part of it. However, as long as it's done constitutionally and properly, there's no issues. Regarding the law itself, there's a lot of confusion. There's still a lot of confusion with registration. My office, since I've been sheriff in 2016, we've only charged 2 or 3 people with SAFE Act violations, and the only time we've charged the SAFE Act is when there's been other crimes committed. That's a lot of the uncertainty. People say, well, are you going to enforce this? We're going to enforce the law. We do have discretion as law enforcement. We're going to use that discretion when appropriate, but we're again in a bind where we are going to enforce the law, but I'm not going to be going door to door. My deputies are not going door to door. If the state wants to do that, they can have somebody else do it, but it's not going to be the Fulton County Sheriff's Department.
Okay, last question for you, sir. There's talk of the 16-hour recertification requirement. That's going to be every 3 years if this is carried. How do you feel about that? Specifically, cost? I'm sure there's going to be cost. Have you heard anything at the state level as far as who would be able to teach this and where it might be offered and how much it might cost?
Well, the state police and Division for Criminal Justice Services have not even put together what the syllabus is for the course. And they haven't even, NRA certified instructors and law enforcement certified instructors are already grandfathered in, but they haven't come up with guidelines for new certified instructors, which is necessary. So that's going to be another delay. I will say this, the way I read the law is if they get their application filed by September 1st, the old classes apply, the old rules apply as far as training and instructions. It's only after September 1st that it changes. So I encourage people in my county to at least file your application now. It's going to be a lot of work for us, but if it's filed by September 1st, then my understanding is some of the requirements don't apply.
Okay, obviously if people have questions, current permit holders, you know, as you said, it's going to be tricky to answer a lot of those questions, but people that want to apply now, we're talking about changes coming in September 1st. People that want to apply now, you know, they're welcome here, right? You handle that.
Come in, get the application, fill it out, and get it back to us as soon as possible. Because it's the filing date. If they file it before September 1st, we are under the old guidelines for instructions and things.
And we talked a little off camera. The sheriff in the sheriff's office is not the licensing officer. How does that work? Real briefly.
We review the application. We check for criminal record, mental health check. We get the references. If there's nothing bad, we send it to the judge. The judge then makes the decision to approve or not approve it. In the past, they could do full carry or restricted hunting, fishing, hiking job or premises. Now, if they approve you, you get full carry.
Based on what we've talked about here during this interview, you would encourage folks before September 1st? If somebody's interested in getting a permit, should they do it now? Should they wait? What would you say?
I would suggest that they file an application by September 1st with us, filing the application. And that stays the clock, and they fall under the prior to September 1st. We're not there to argue with anyone. We're there to try to answer as many questions as we can. But again, I emphasize that there's more unanswered questions with this law than there is answered questions. We're going to do our best to educate the public. That's about it.
Down here in Fulton County, New York, you've been watching Fulton County Area News.